Hello, everyone. Today I will be explaining blockchain and its application through cryptocurrency. And I will begin by explaining what blockchain is, and I will do that by first explaining what a ledger is. Now, a ledger, to anyone that's taking any accounting class, probably already knows, is a simply a book or journal that contains a collection of transactions posted on accounts in the form of debits or credits, and its main use is to maintain accountability for either a business or an individual. If yeah, so it's mainly to keep track of where money moves or how money moves around in transactions. And so, for example, if the IRS wanted to find out where your employer was getting the money to pay you, they might look at their ledger and see, yeah, on this date they paid their employee this much, and 2 months earlier they made money through the sale of an asset, or through the normal operation of their business. But the point is to make it easier to trace where money comes from and how it was moved around. The downside to a ledger is that it can easily be manipulated, and so you might have all heard the term "cook the books," which is a term to describe certain accountants manipulating um, a ledger to make it seem like, for example, that a business is more profitable than it actually is, or they might make it seem so that an individual makes more or less money than they actually do. And to prevent this, the concept behind blockchains came about. And so with a blockchain, uh, the ledger now becomes, well, I guess what could be best be described as a block. And so a transaction is recorded within a block, and the transaction, I'm sorry, the block contains all information regarding the transaction, including the amount of money each party had going into the transaction, so that it makes sense that, or sort of balances with the money that that the both parties left the transaction with. And cryptocurrency came about as a form to ease the flow of transactions. So blockchain is just a way of recording a transaction, but cryptocurrency was a way of, um, it's a type of currency that was came about to ease the flow of transactions. And so, and typically the way a normal transaction works with a bank is, let's say for example, you pay for something with a debit card, and so the bank has to validate a transaction by making sure that you have enough money in your account, in your debit account, checking account, to make sure that you can cover the transaction. They also need to make sure there are no transaction fees or overdraft fees or anything like that that you might also have to need to cover. That if once everything has been paid for, suddenly you don't have enough money to cover everything, then the transaction falls through. This whole process usually takes 2 to 3 business days, depending on the bank. Sometimes longer, depending on if it's two different banks in two different countries. It could be even longer than that. So cryptocurrency came about as a way to ease the flow of transactions around the world. And cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin use blockchain to maintain accountability and to validate transactions. And so, I guess a typical Bitcoin transaction might within a blockchain might look like a block that shows party A had, for example, 15 Bitcoin that they then sent to party B. They sent 13 Bitcoin to party B, and it'll say before the transaction, before this specific transaction, party B had 1 Bitcoin in their wallet, and after the transaction, now party A has 2 Bitcoin and party B has 14 Bitcoin. And so for the next transaction, it'll be recorded that party B has 14 Bitcoin, and for the party A's next transaction, it'll show that they only have uh, 2 Bitcoin. And so because of this, every block which contains information of transaction depends on the previous block to validate it, and or to, so when it's pretty much impossible to commit fraud, because if one block contains information that is invalid. Like if party B with their 14 Bitcoin tries to buy something with that's worth 15 Bitcoin, it'll immediately seem suspicious and invalidated because the previous block will show that they should only have 14 Bitcoin in their wallet. And the people in charge of validating these transactions are referred to as Bitcoin miners. And Bitcoin miners simply have to solve the algorithm that each block is, I guess, encrypted with and or hashed with, and that one will the person who solves it will get Bitcoin as a result, and the transaction will be validated and added to the blockchain. And Satoshi Nakamoto had the goal of having a transaction validated on average about every 10 minutes. The more people try to validate it, the more difficult the problems to validate become. Therefore, therefore it's less competition or weed out competition, and keeps people incentivize people to come and validate by offering them a reward. And so after doing this research on this, I figured, wow, this is a really good system, immune to counterfeit, very well encrypted, and it's decentralized. It doesn't rely on a bank to validate transactions, so it's definitely the future.